Vishal, can you give Manak and Dragana the rights to join as a panelist?
Mr. Vikas, can you hear me? Hello, sir?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's me, Tobden. I tried joining in, but I think I'm joined as a participant, as a viewer, not as a... I don't have any privilege to see the number of participants or to share the screen.
Who's this talking? Sorry,
It's
I can't.
This is Karma.
Hi,
It's Karma from Renew.
Okay. Vishal, can you give Karma, Kinga, and Kinga already has it, Karma and Vinchan as panelists, this thing, right? Manak, can you hear us now? Are you? Yeah, I can see you, Manak, now. Oh, but we've not got... I think we've lost Dragana. I can... What's the Zoom session these days without some tech glitches? I think all of us have been used to this, but my apologies on this because we've got limited time and we would need to start. I'm just waiting. I'll just give a couple of minutes to Dragana before we can start the session.
Vikas, can we start? I will share the presentation.
Karma, you'll have to wait for 2 minutes. We are waiting for Dragana to join, and then I'll introduce the session. After that, you can share the screen. Thank you.
Sure.
Give me 2 minutes. Vishal, I think Dragana has not received the panelist invite. Can you please send it to her now? Dragana, just hold on. We're sending you an invite to join as a panelist.
I got it now. Thank you. I'm here.
Great. So yes, I think we've got everybody on board now. That's great. And apologies for the confusion, but maybe it's time we should start. We're already 2 minutes late, and it's a packed session. So I think we can start now. But great to see all of you and everybody who's joined the session. A warm welcome from IPPF Saro side. We are so glad that all of you could join this exciting session, which is on engaging men and boys, entitled "It's a Man's World After All, Engaging Men and Boys for Delivering SRHR for All." Our session today is quite packed one with a lot of diverse experiences of organization and speakers. They're from 3 different countries. They've been working with young men and boys. And it's focusing on how we can foster constructive engagement of men, along with discussion all the challenges that I think the organizations face on the ground, the kind of backlash that they face from sometimes even within the ecosystem of SRHR service delivery organizations in specifically engaging young boys and men for SRHR. We'll have 3 presentations. The first presentation will be by Renew Bhutan, which is a civil society organization, and they're presenting some of the research work that qualitative research that they've done around gender norms among men and boys. That would be followed by a presentation by Manak, who's the executive director at the YP Foundation, and his issues will focus around how traditional languages and discussions around men and boy can be sometimes actually detrimental to engaging them. So how to expand these services in terms of really engaging men and boys through their own felt needs, and how men and boys also have different kinds of vulnerabilities. When we talk about, they're not a homogeneous group that we often describe them as. And our last presentation will be from Dragon, and that's like, I'm really looking forward to the work that they've been doing in Serbia around a program which engages men and boys through theater, drama, sarcasm, and uses a gender role reversal technique in doing that. We're really glad to have the session moderated by Ravi. Ravi is the regional director at the International Center for Research on Women, Asia Regional Office in New Delhi. And he's been working over the last 3 decades on issues of gender, men, masculinity, male sexual health, gender equality, violence against women, reproductive health, family planning, HIV/AIDS across not only India, but the Asian region as well as the globe. He has published extensively on issues in both Indian and international journals. Prior to joining ICRW in 2007, Ravi was with the Population Council in New Delhi and at the International Institute of Population Sciences, which is based in Mumbai, where he was the professor in population policies and programs. Ravi has also served as a high-level committee, served as a member on the high-level committee on the status of women from 2013 to 2016 with the Government of India, and the Rights and Empowerment Working Group on the FP 2020 initiatives. He's currently serving as a commissioner on the Lancet Commission on Gender and Health, and serves on the board of Women Lift Health and Global Health 50/50. So without me taking any more time, I would hand over to Ravi to discuss about his vast experience in gender transformative programs that engage men and boys. So over to you, Ravi, for the rest of the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Vikas. Thank you so much. Good morning. Welcome to this session. As Vikas said, we are looking forward to some very exciting presentations. The discourse on masculinity and how to engage men and boys in on the issues of sexual and reproductive health is not new. We, in fact, since the times of Cairo conference, when the commitment was made on this issue, we all have come a long way. Recent WHO article, if you see in 2020, reiterates the question. That question is not whether to include boys and men in SRHR, but how to do it. I think that's where the issue continues to remain a bit unresolved, and a lot of new experiences are being generated. I really was fascinated by the title of the session, that it's a man's world after all. and it almost suggested as if we are in a given situation where options are few, as if we are stuck against the wall. If the overall agenda is to move towards gender equality and gender transformation, as Vikas was alluding to, I think it seems we have a long way to go. ICRW and partners globally have done global research to find out men's attitudes towards gender and gender equality. And overall, what we see is that men are quite ambivalent towards the issues around gender equality. With varying proportions, a lot of men in many contexts still believe that any gain for women is a loss to them. And I think to have this mindset that it's a zero-sum game that we are engaged in is somehow the major block in engaging men or in bringing about gender transformation. I hope that with in this session, with these 3 presentations that we are going to listen to, all these 3 presenters are seasoned practitioners. They are really embedded, entrenched into the program on the ground, and they bring to us their experience of engaging men and boys on these difficult conversations of transformation, and what they have done in their program to address that. will be addressing this issue of addressing ambivalence, addressing the complex attitudes of men towards gender and gender equality. It doesn't seem a very simple and unilateral, linear kind of an effort where you campaign and you see the changes. It does not happen. We have seen in programs after programs that how attitudes can have been changed or have shown some kind of a shift, but when it comes to bystander or practices, you begin to see men stepping back. So I'll not go into the details. I think we have some the presentations that would highlight these. Let me first begin by inviting a presentation from Bhutan, our friends from Bhutan. This is a team which is led by Karma, Rinchen, and Kinga. Kinga will be presenting making the presentation. Kinga is 25 years old and an intern with Respect Education, Nurture, and Empower Women, RENEW, a non-profit organization, which is dedicated to the empowerment of women and children in Bhutan and promotes sexual and reproductive and rights, health and rights issues for all. Kinga is keen to learn about the social discrimination and violence that women in Bhutanese societies face and understand the harmful gender norms which can be eliminated to create a gender equal Bhutanese society. He has also been working with Ability Bhutan Society to learn about strategies to help children in disability. So welcome, Kinga. We are really looking forward to your presentation. How much time do we have for Kinga? Vikas, will you please help moderating that?
Yeah,
I'll appreciate. So,
sure. Thanks, Ravi. Kinga, I'm requesting you to have the session for 10 to 12 minutes of presentation. I think then we can follow it with the question hour session. Since since the Renew team has to leave early today, I think it would be good if we can have some questions after this, and then we will follow it with presentations from Manak and Dragana and again in question session. So over to you, Kinga.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the warm welcome. So I will directly go to the topic. I will be talking about existing norms and attitudes on sexual and gender-based violence among men and boys, and exploring avenues and opportunities for male engagement in preventing sexual and gender-based violence in Bhutan. This study was done with collaboration of IDRIC consultancy with Renew. Before heading to the presentation, I would like to give out a brief background of sexual and gender-based violence in Bhutan. As per the survey conducted by Bhutan National Survey, 6.1% of the population face physical violence, 2.1% of them face sexual violence, while 3.2% of them face psychological violence, which is caused by their intimate partner. Women who are financially dependent upon their partner are seen to be more prone to violence. Next slide. The objective of the research was to find the understanding of men's perception towards sexual and gender-based violence, and to understand the cause of violence. And for the research method, we used the quantitative approach. And the technique that we used is that of focus group discussion. And to collect sample, we used the convenience sampling techniques. So using this technique, a total of 180 participants were selected, consisted of male students of grade 7 till 12, college students, cab drivers, and community members consisting of male between the age of 16 till 65. And to talk about the research finding, we found out that there's a limited understanding of sexual and gender-based violence and domestic violence in Bhutan. Focus group discussion among the male participants revealed that most men consider rape and physical violence as only the type of violence. They do not consider emotional assault, mental state, and psychological trauma, and other non-physical violence as a part of violence. For them, only physical violence were considered as violence. Also, the discussion showed that men as a general had the misconception that only men are the one who cause violence and women are the victim. And the second finding of the research were changing role of women amidst patriarchal norms. The discussion showed that men are gradually accepting the women's role and participant in the society as much as the men. They also accepted that women are equal to men or somewhat more capable than men. Also that they need opportunities like that of men in various roles in the society, apart from that of a housemaker. And next slide. Next slide. Financial dependence. Back on. Research finding. And how where?
If you're having problems at the technology side, we can support you if you want us to host the presentation.
It's okay, sir. Next slide. So perceived risk factor for domestic violence and sexual and gender-based violence. The next broad category of the research finding is assigning blame and other perceived factors for domestic violence and sexual and gender-based violence. The focus group discussion showed a similar result as that of National Survey report I mentioned earlier in the background. It is that the financial dependency of the women on their husband were one of the major reasons of women falling victim to violence and not raising their voice. The study also showed that extramarital affairs were common reason of violence, and the participant noted that these affairs were more commonly committed by men. They also noted that growing use of mobile phones also hampered their relationship, causing increasing violence. Few men in the focus group discussion blamed women and how women dress due to modernization as a factor of increasing violence due to tempted men. They also mentioned that the pornographic contents were easily available online, which also made the men tempting and violent. Few participants mentioned that younger women were increasingly abusing drugs and alcohol, making them vulnerable, thus falling prey to the perpetrators. And another category of the finding is about structural issue pertaining to sexual and gender-based violence prevention. Next. Next. No. The discussion showed that there needs to be a proper awareness programs and stricter law against violence to curb this issue. They also noted that the organization like Renew were pro-women, and this organization need to favor men too, and that if the men were victims of violence, they're unable to take support due to social stigma. So to talk about recommendation. Recommendation. Mata. La. La. And to talk about the recommendation, so therefore we will discuss the recommendation about ways to engage. First recommendation is that there should be a proper education in schools and institutions that focus on sexual education, sexual and gender-based violence, domestic violence, positive masculinity to break traditional gender norms. Apart from that, regular mainstream media, new methods like social media networks, television shows, movies, music video can be used as an educational platform to reach more audience. Training focus on issues related to sexual and gender-based violence and domestic violence. Thokpas are the local elected leaders of the sub-blocks and villages, so they are always dealing with this issue at a grassroots level. Therefore, sanitizing on this issue among the Thokpas can be effective measure to tackle these cases. Another effective measure can be to improve legal literacy and sexual and gender-based violence and domestic violence among men, and also by thank you.
Thank you, Kinga. Thank you, Karma and Rinchan. Ravi, I would suggest we can probably have a quick questions for the Renew team, because they have a emergency session that's come up in a different district and they need to travel. So
Sure. So, Kinga, thank you so much. This was very exciting set of findings, and something I'm sure new within the society of Bhutan. Although I suppose this is some of the very early day findings on how men respond to the issues around women and gender. It seems there is a lot of binary attitudes, and a lot is along the lines of perpetrators and victimhood, which is presented in the form of women. My sense is that your recommendation about comprehensive sexuality education or starting the gender education within the school system is absolutely right on the point. I was just wondering if you or your team would like to reflect on Renew's work in addressing some of these issues at the broader societal level. That might be helpful to a lot of our audience, how you propose to address them in society in communities in general. Are there specific approaches that you use? Are there specific pathways that you have in mind? Or is it largely based on a generic education? Is that clear? I mean, you or
Yes.
Ranchan or Karma, anyone can please respond.
Okay, so Ravi, thank you so much for that question. We have our M&E officer, Sonam Tenzin, who was also very working closely on this survey. So he's very eager to answer that question. He's right beside me. His name is Sonam Tenzin. He's the monitoring and evaluation officer, and he wants to take over that question, if that's fine.
Absolutely fine. Thank you.
A very warm welcome to everyone. It's a very pleasure to meet everyone from different delegates out here. It's an honor, firstly, and to go directly to answer the question that the Ravi Verma has asked about it. It's about the bringing about the comprehensive sexuality education within the school and the institution, which I and my project manager was able to come up with one project which has been funded by IPPF. I think the Vikas out here has more aware of it. So in this sexual education, comprehensive sexuality education, we have come up with varieties of activities that will basically try to cover up all the things that the sir have mentioned about it. As of now, we have just focused on identifying some schools from all over our country, and to tackle that issue, we have even started having discussion with the Minister of Education, and the Director of General himself has been very much comprehensive and supportive of us having this comprehensive sexual education. So very much soon we are going to bring what are the activities that are related to that of comprehensive sexual education with the teacher firstly, and I think that will be spread out to the student. This is one of the key activities that we have planned, and we will be very much happy to update very soon about that too. I think if this answers.
Oh, it does. Thank you. This is really good. Do you expect any challenge in implementing this kind of sensitive programs?
Yes. as for the now, we are not able to come up. I mean, we are not able to conduct this due to the local government election. So after this year, I think we are very much ready to go out with these activities, as we have already been having a discussion with the Minister of Education. First, we have around 2 to 3 meetings, and recently we had a meeting with the Director General and the Secretary himself. So we have asked them to identify some of the schools that are much needed of the sexuality, comprehensive sexual education in place. So yeah, I think the challenges would be right now the government election, which is going out right now.
Thank you. I think what I might take away from your presentation and your response is how critical it is to engage with the larger governance structure and system in undertaking some of these activities that challenge the fundamental attitudes about equality in gender and relationships and sexuality. I'm glad that you are using that approach. We really look forward to your results in due course of time when you begin to implement. And I hope there will be some kind of baseline information that you would compare against the achievements of your program. The findings that Kinga presented really provide a benchmark. And once your program is on the way, on moving along, I'm sure you will be undertaking some kind of dipstick measures to track qualitatively as to whether it is moving in the right direction or not. So thank you very much. Why I'm saying this, because I think working with men and boys on issues of gender equality, on issues of violence, means an extra vigilance, an extra, extra insights that you continue to generate as to how things are changing. The transformations don't happen in linear fashion, as I was saying. So I really congratulate the team and all of you who are engaged in this program, and wish you all the best. Are there any questions, Vikas, from the audience? Are there any issues that you want to raise right now, because the team would be leaving?
Yeah, sure, Ravi. There is a question, but before I go to the question, I just wanted to thank you, Karma, Sonam, and Kinga, for presenting this. I've been also on that journey, Ravi. I've been fortunate to be part of that journey with Renew on that project. So I think the interesting part of that project is how we are looking at a very multi-sectoral approach in SGBV, where young men and boys have also featured in with respect to CSC, with respect to getting the monastic institutions involved in Bhutan, to take that work forward and also with the Ministry of Health, their community health workers and things like that. So I think it's a very comprehensive program, and you're right. Our idea is also to be very strongly cognitive of the fact that it needs an evaluation of that entire program. And we are thinking about, currently we're in the process of a very evaluative theory of change and going forward how we can roll it out. I think we're all completely excited, and as you know me, I think the evaluation part also gets me quite excited. So we also had a question around I think something that Renew team referred to about women, when they said something about women not being the victims. What did they mean by that? That even men were victimized, or and if they were, who are the victim? Who were they being victimized by? So I think that was something that probably Renew team in their presentation had referred to about victimization, that men felt victimized by somebody.
Yes.
Sorry, Kinga and Karma or Sonam, if you want to respond.
Okay.
And can I also add one small question which has come on the chat box, which says that a lot of this sexuality education and issues around gender should begin at home. And do you have any response to that? Will Renew have some kind of strategy to reach out to the families and homes?
Okay, first I would like to answer the because what the because asked about is the a man's being the perpetrator, being the victim. No, I think there has been a miscommunication when our Kinga has been presenting that. This was based on the research finding. It was based on the limited understanding on domestic and sexual gender-based violence. In that finding, it was set out to be that the group discussion found out to be that the men were generally under a misconception that only the men are supposed to be committing the sin, and the women are supposed to be always being a victim. This was what he was trying to be conveying the message, and I think it was it has happened to be a wrong miscommunication.
That's fine. Absolutely fine. That was a very
Fine, Karma. Yep.
Yeah, no, that was a nice. So there was no misrepresentation. I think it was a perceived impression that you got from the qualitative. That's what Kinga was saying. And I think I completely endorse with that idea, which is not new only to the Bhutanese society, but everywhere else globally. There is a binary perception around men and women, and that presents its own challenge in changing these attitudes. So it's good to have that finding in order to address that in a transformative manner. So thank you.
Okay. I have just got it right now. Okay, recently we this finding we were able to come up with different stakeholder, including from film industry association, the bikers, and even from the NCWC, who works with the legal part, and as well as some from the taxi driver association were present out here recently, and all were male participants. And in the discussion, we were able to present all the research findings, and after that, we were able to come up with so many ideas. And for that matters, we have even come up with some suggestion of how the activity should be worked on based from the perceived idea from the man's perspective. So we have come up with some of the ideas that what a different stakeholder will be able to come up with the activities and to be able to present in their own ways. Some film industry come with the ideas that they will be able to present some sexual reproductive health and right through their film, television, media, and some to be stories and videos and all. And in case of the bikers, they want to come up with ideas of spreading this sexual reproductive health and right through riding their bikes, going into the rural areas where the people has not been able to reach. And we, even as our organization or a small part of activities, and most importantly, the taxi driver association, it has a huge population in the taxi association, and it's all over the 20 Zonka. And we are very much of the fact that they want to conduct some activities in this key area. And recently, very soon they are going to have some activities based on that and reach out some parents as well and communities most probably.
Thank you, Karma. Thank you so much. So I think we have already passed the time frame. Karma, you're saying something? You're done.
I think that's all from me. If you have any questions, I'll be very much happy to answer about that.
Thank you. Unfortunately, I think Vikas would not allow me to go on this discussion because he said there are others waiting. And it was such an exciting presentation and such exciting and interesting insights. So both Karma and Kinga and Rinchen for participating in this, making this presentation. We look forward to the work of Renew, and we look forward to learning from you people in Bhutan. So please share your findings as you move around. Thank you. So I think with these words, I would like to move on and would like to invite Manak Matiani. Manak, in fact, in recent times, he's been a rising star in India on the youth front. He has done a lot of work, he and his team. He is a feminist, a queer activist, and the executive director of the YP Foundation. This is an organization that develops young people's rights-based feminist and intersectional leadership of social change. Manak has led work on issues of gender justice, sexuality rights, health, equity and inclusion, as a trainer, as a filmmaker, as a development professional, and facilitator with youth groups with both national and international organizations. So Manak has generated a lot of rich experience in last few years that he has been engaged on this front. So I really look forward to hearing Manak, and he has something very exciting to share from his work with YP Foundation. Manak, please.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks so much, Ravi, for that very kind introduction. If we can start, I'm not able to see the presentation yet. Is it coming on screen?
No.
So I'm going to just wait till it starts. I can use that time to introduce the YP Foundation a little bit. At the YP Foundation, we work with young people. As Ravi introduced, we work primarily on issues of gender and sexuality, and we work on building young people's leadership, on implementing programs, as well as sharing today is based largely on our work with young men and boys across different programs that we've been running, and our realizations around how curricula-based programs work with young men and boys, and what kind of changes we brought in from our research and learning in the way that we started working with young men and boys in those things. So I'm going to just wait for the presentation to become full screen and then take it from there.
So this is your presentation.
Everybody see this?
Yes, that is my presentation. I'm just waiting for it to start.
Just Manak, let me know when to change the slides. I'll keep changing them.
Sure. Do you can you make that full screen? I still see the non-full screen version of it. I'm not sure if that's just me or in general.
Just Manak, just give me a minute. There's some issue with the computer. I'll just fix it.
All right. Otherwise, if you want me to try and share the screen, I can also try and do that from my side. I think, yeah, this works.
Is it working now?
Yes, I can see the first slide, which is full screen. You can go to the next one. Yeah, so I think the starting point for us was that, this idea that, okay, we figured out programming with girls and women. And so we should now turn to the boys and men who've been outside of these programs, looking into the sessions that we're doing with young women and girls. And we should start doing something at YP, which is much more specific to the needs of young boys and what they really want and understand from their world and their experience. We are a youth organization. Just to introduce ourselves again, I think if the YP Foundation were a person, it'd be like this person over here who's reclining and lying down. It'd be a fun, sexy, a little bit disruptive kind of person. If you can go to the next slide.
I'm looking at the live one actually.
So if you can go to the next slide.
Yeah, I think I'm just like trying. There's something stuck. Yeah. There's some issue with the slide movement. Yeah, is that the one?
Yes. So so our starting point on working with men and boys at YP was a seemingly impossible ideal of building young men's feminist leadership. And that was the question that we put to ourselves when we started developing curricula and programs, saying, what does young men's feminist leadership look like? Where leadership is something that is already automatically and already given to men on a platter. And so what does removing yourself from leadership and starting to listen to other people and their leadership, particularly people of other genders, what does that look like? And that became our starting point to think about how to work with young men and boys. We can go to the next slide. So We work with young men and boys both through comprehensive sexuality education, as was being talked about in the previous presentation, and sexual and reproductive health and rights programming, structured curricula, and training-based experiential programs. And we also run programs on violence prevention, which are both in school, in education institution spaces, as well as in communities. So all of these different aspects of programming with young men and boys is something that we do take up at the YP Foundation. If you can go to the next slide. What we realized while researching for our own programs and talking to many other people when we were finalizing our curricula to work with young men and boys, was that programs want men's sexual and romantic relationships to be all of this. We want them to have information and understand their responsibilities. We want to measure gender equal behavior. We want to teach technical information and emotional behavior, SRHR, and consent. So we want to sort of make young men's sexual and romantic relationships, all of this, where the young men themselves, and if you go to the next slide, the young men themselves want something a little different. We already know gender norms and pressures around masculinity and sexuality, but from conversations with rural health service providers, we realized that when they put out camps, the biggest demand that comes to them from adolescent boys, interestingly, is for emergency contraceptives and for Viagra, local variations of Viagra. And so that gave us a lot of insight on how men and young boys particularly see their own sexual lives. What they want from that is fun. They want their sex lives to be sexy, good, and in abundance. So they want lots of sex, they want great sex, fun, all of that. But interestingly, their questions were about pleasure, but not just their own pleasure. A lot of young men and boys asked us this great question of how do I know that my partner is having fun? How do I know my partner is enjoying themselves? And that was a great starting point for us to think about how to engage with men and boys in a way that speaks to their needs and their interests. Can we go to the next slide? And the discrepancy that really sort of stood out for us, as we go to the next slide, it becomes a little bit clear, is that the young men and boys had these two choices of, programs telling them, give up your own privilege, have less role, give up your position of power. And in return, what you will get is a more equitable relationship later in life where you will also have to do more work. So it didn't really add up. You got less right now with the promise of getting even less in future. So spelling out the long-term benefits of understanding their positions within patriarchy and effects of certain modes of masculinities, it gets academic, it gets a little bit tough to really transact with men and boys. And building this understanding of how masculinities and this perception of what they're supposed to be as men affects their reactions in consent and in sexual and romantic relationships was something that we really took back to the drawing board to develop the way we wanted to run programs with men and boys. So, and the fundamental thing that stood out for us was that women's marginalization, when we work with men and boys in programs, women's marginalization will evoke sympathy immediately, but men's own privilege escapes notice. And our work became to actually build cognizance of this privilege, while also acknowledging the multiple pressures that they might be under as men and as boys in all kinds of interactions that they're having. So this not adding up was important in our lens of understanding men and boys. And when we scanned through multiple approaches and curricula of working with men and boys in India particularly, we realized that while we are trying to reach men to teach them consent, there are immense feelings of low self-esteem due to rejection that we are not being able to address. A large number of young men in their early 20s described their experiences of being dumped as betrayal. If the women left them, it was betrayal. If the women told them, I don't want to be with you, it was betrayal. If the women actually sort of, in a very calm and polite manner, told them, I'm done with this relationship, I don't want to be in a relationship anymore, that was also betrayal. And so the idea that this crisis of masculinity is actually the gap between the sense of entitlement to power and actually having the power, which that really becomes very stark for young men when they are rejected. And this feeling of revenge, anger, betrayal, hurt, all of that, there is no space within curricula to address this effectively. And that became the work to do when we started working with young men and boys. And what we also realized is that it is difficult. The challenges were that it's difficult to build solidarity between men. Men in a group, in a room together, are continuously in competition with each other because they are taught that competition will give you very real rewards in the world. Self-image is decided by these codes of masculinity that we heard about in the previous presentation. They all are given to men through various socialization processes, and there is lack of holistic programming that engages and understands and doesn't just teach. No means no. It sort of leaves room for conversation, which is more holistic, which is more engaging in that sense. So that transformation for men, because women are easier to collectivize in that experience of being marginalized and being vulnerable. That experience doesn't exist for young men and boys. And so it's difficult to bring them together, keep them together. The logics of bringing them together have to be different. If you can move to the next slide. I'll come to what made us hopeful and excited about the future programming despite all of these challenges is that addressing rejection, when we were able to do that, that made us open up many exciting conversations with men where they were much more open to the idea of listening to their partners, learning from their partners, and being better behaved even in anger. We also realized that friendship is a significant space for men. And these solidarities between men of different kinds from different communities are very important to foster, because the primary male experience and the realm of experience between relationships is in relationships between men and other men. And that's actually where they are learning and furthering stereotypes about relationships, consent, sexuality, and also feeling pressured by those same ideas. So breaking into those spaces of friendship and transforming that space entirely instead of just working with individual men became the key to us being able to run programs more effectively, where we would work in groups and try and transform the entire group together in conversation with each other and in conversation with us. These became the inroads to discussing love, romance, sex, relationships, and those related issues much better with communities of young men and boys. So that, I think, has been our experience and insight on trying to figure out what curriculum works better and how really to work with men more effectively to bring some transformation in how they approach gender, relationships, and perform violence or not in those spaces. Thank you.
Thank you, Manak, for a very insightful presentation. I'm sure there will be lots of questions from the audience. We will take them up. Should we, in the Vikas, in the interest of time, should we move to Dragna?
Yeah,
and then take all the questions and discussions at a later stage now?
Yeah, I think that would be great, Ravi. Thank you.
All right. So Dragna, why don't you just switch on your, well, there you are. Great. So please welcome Dragna. She is an executive director of Serbian Association for Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights Association, SRH Serbia, a member association of IPPF European Network region. For 20 years now, social responsibility and potential to influence the change within a person and society have been the passion of Dragna and her focus of work. She is an activist, she is a program manager, trainer, policy strategist, and strategic planner, striving to close the gaps and enable responses related to global well-being. It's commendable in areas including but not limiting to reproductive health and rights, gender stereotypes, HIV and AIDS, and discrimination and stigma. So floor is yours, Dragna. We look forward to your presentation. I suppose you are going to show a movie or some kind of short film before you talk. So please, let's move
Exactly. Yes. Thank you, Ravi. Thank you, Vikas. And I wanted to express my deep appreciation for your inviting us, the organization that I belong to be present at your highly meaningful gathering. And I'm very happy to be here with, I have to say, a huge fascination with your region. I have to say I have visited in 2019, and thank you for the first mask that I have received, because you kind of guys knew what was going on already. So, I was so happy when we were back in Serbia in March, and I was like, oh, I got the mask from the organizers in New Delhi. So before I start, I would like to tell you a bit about the project that we actually were working on. So it's a project that actually plays with gender stereotypes. We just wanted not only to state the facts and to give the audience and beneficiaries the 2 cents that we have about what was going on with gender stereotypes, but we actually wanted to make a joke. And why is that? Because the majority of jokes, as you know, start with, a woman walks into the bar. Or, like, why do you have a cat? Well, it's better than woman. So in any way, we were actually thinking that it's a bit abusive to always use women in those kinds of gender jokes. So we tried to joke ourselves with gender stereotypes. The result was actually a project that lasted for 3 years. And I have to say that the project actually was so huge and so successful that we are now replicating it with other countries from the European region. Plus that we have actually been selected as a good practice in some of the donors here in our region of Balkans and Europe. Because it actually shows how you can use humor and jokes to target the audience and actually learn them something. About Serbia, I'm first sorry because I don't have the work environment behind me. It's 7:50 now in our country. So this is my this is my room. And I just wanted to actually share with you why why were we so happy to play with the gender norms. Serbia is a country that actually is in Europe. It's a very small country, especially regarding your large countries respectively. But I think it's the fourth of a patriarchal behavioral in our part of the Europe. Actually, I wouldn't say the fourth because there are a lot of right-wing movements now in our part of the Europe. So the gender norms are coming back in fashion on the big door. So before I start presenting you, I just wanted to share the movie that we have created jointly with our colleagues from London Central Office. So let me see, share screen. Okay, share. Because I am sorry, I don't think that I have the ability to share screen. Let me try again.
Let me see that, Ragna. I can share the movie probably for you.
Yes, thank you so much. But in our, so to speak, waiting for me to show you the movie, I also wanted to tell you that our goal of the project was actually to involve 12,000 young men and women. We wanted, thank you. Okay. Oh, let's now see the movie. Okay. I am not having any tone. Okay.
All societies all around the world are in a way patriarchal. In Serbian society, social issues as gender is, they're very rarely seriously part of public debates. They're neglected.
Gender is being learned from when you are 1 or 2 or 3. When you grow up, you want to be equal, and in some respects you find it possible through the law, but legislation per se is not enough. It will not make women change their attitudes, especially because traditional norms just hold you back. Gender roles are merely roles that we are playing all our lives. And this is why playing them on the stage makes perfect sense.
Through participatory theater, you can deal with any kind of social problem. But in this particular project, we are trying to enable young people to recognize gender as a social construct. They will not just be spectators, but they will be spect-actors.
The general research question is, does this kind of theater-based educational project change our views and understanding on gender identity, gender roles?
These situations are like improvisations from everyday life, where boys, girls have opportunity to change roles. We are just trying to help young people to express themselves.
Smatram da su rodne uloge pogrešno postavljene i da stvaraju dosta veliki problem u društvu i smatram da pol ne bi smeo da ima veze sa rodnim ulogama. Možda ću se u budućnosti baviti time da se rodne uloge, da se njihov značaj smanji u ovom društvu.
As a woman, I'm expected to aspire to other things like marriage and to be a good mother. I think that it's important to raise awareness and to teach young girls that women can do anything.
I look forward to participants in the audience in large number, of course, but also I hope that we will be able to change the minds of the people from the NGOs, who are our partners on the project, because it's them who go back to their towns and influence many more.
Education is not about telling someone what to think. It's about provoking thinking. It's about developing argumentation. The gender issue is not an issue that should be important only for women. It's the question of every citizen in Serbia and all around the world, because they are reflecting our capability to live together, and they are important for everyone.
Okay. So that was the short video.
Great.
And maybe because it would be okay now to play the presentation, if it's okay with you, or I can't.
Yes, sure, Dragna. I'll just put down the presentation.
Can we share the presentation? Okay. So before we start with the presentation, I'd like to tell you a couple of, so to speak, words about the organization itself. So can we please move on to another slide? Okay. The next one, Vikas, please. Okay. So can we have next slide, please? Yes. So a couple of words about organization, because I know that we are not so to speak famous among you guys. So we were founded in 2002. We actually work as a lot of organizations, actually like 100% of organizations in the IPPF on the unmet needs on the area of SRHR. And we actually are very devoted to human rights and gender perspective. We are very actually devoted, and we work so strongly on SDG 3 and 5. And our work actually involves advocacy, prevention on HIV and AIDS, youth, SRHR, and SGBV. We have been an IPPF member since 2010. And that's it about the organization. I will actually answer everything else that you have to ask about us. Can we have the next slide, please?
Dragona, can you see the slides? For me, it's gone to slide 3. Is it visible on your
Yes.
screen?
The background of the initiative, I've said something about that as well. It's on reproductive health. Yes. Yes. That's super. Thanks, Vikas. So actually, in our country at the moment, we are like a nation devoted to environmental priority in a lot of ways. Serbia is somehow fascinated by the growth of a person and the specific opportunities that the person should have, but the embryo has like a pedestal that the state is keeping it on. The national initiatives related to reproductive role of women actually follow this line of thinking, like we want to reverse demographic aging in Serbia, but it's very hard to do because people are just going to Serbia at the moment. So they just want to support the traditional family models. And this is what the background of the initiative was actually a couple of years ago when we started with the program ourselves. Thank you, Vikas. Next slide, please. Good. Could we have next slide?
I think, Dragona, there's a lag there, so that's why it's taking a bit of time at your end.
Yes. So the innovation challenge that we actually had while we approached the project of the central office was, can you think of okay, so the innovation challenge was, can you think of in next to section reproductive health and services. So what actually we had in mind, we could go to next slide and I'll just keep talking. Don't want to keep people time to ask questions. So the thing is that when we actually to have 6,000 people participate in online debates that actually talk about the gender transformative model that we were approaching. Then our second objective was to invest to have like about 12,000 young people all together who were a part of the initiative, so that we could actually leave the initiative back to them when the project was finished. And the most important thing was we wanted actually to leave a franchise to the organizations that wanted to stay with us upon project. So over people that were reached through the program by 30% in all of our areas, and it was very important that we have created. We had to choose between 15 organizations that have applied on 5 spots, because we could only support 5 different NGOs in transformative gender role model that we were actually implementing. So I think that the model was very successful, but beyond, the model was actually so successful because we have used one actually one feature change. The we didn't change the roles. So in this particular case, we were asked girls' roles and vice versa. When there was a role that actually was, so it was actually very a specific situation. The scenario itself has we tried to tackle stories from everyday life. For example, we have 18th birthday. On one side you have the boys, on the other you have the girls playing the different roles. You wish for a boy when he's 18, and what do you wish for a girl? So with the statement that she has to get married and has a job, very a boy. So by playing that, we induced a lot of laughter, a lot of sarcasm, a lot of jokes. We tried by using the dose of humor and sarcasm. Of course, LGBT rights, when we approach the Pride Month in Serbia, the role of the audience becomes some kind of, sometimes want to talk about different topics, or they actually express very aggressive views towards the different person that actually we have actually deals solely with gender, and we have a colleague who is a PhD in gender. So after the scenarios, we actually talk to young people. We try to what we wanted them to see as a situation, and they just couldn't find the way to grasp that, even though we didn't have understood the whole point of our exercise before we talked to this gender specialist. So after the discussion, we are actually creating the focus group discussion to see how much the intervention was success. And then we repeat. The final result was actually that we were able to alter the preset, so to speak, gender opinion in young people, because the point in them using the shoes to see how is it from our lens, or for us to see how is it from their lens. So it's actually very important that we have tackled in between the different genders that we could actually put in a scenario. And it was very important for us to promote the culture of tolerance throughout the entire project. So the most, so to speak, successful moment was the research that we have done after the project, which has shown that there is the increase of 20% per every town that we have actually taken the scenario to and have the play in that particular town. We have an increase of young people, first of all, wanting to be members of the NGO. The second, wanting to be members of the activist projects, you know, something that expresses the opinion, something that actually states your thing in a very rooted and informed based way. And from the project, who have said that the conclusions, the discussion have actually of the gender normatives way. I would say that we have been very, and that we actually wanted to continue with. We're very happy now to be able to share the initiative with other countries of the IPPF European Region Network, and to see if we can actually move what we have learned here in Serbia to other countries, and to see how we can explore other cultural patterns and the patriarchal norms, how to tackle them in an appropriate way. So that would be actually in a short way from me. I am hoping that I have not crossed the line of 8 to 10 minutes, but I will be here if you need me to answer any kind of question that you have about the presentation itself. In any way, thank you so much, and it's a great pleasure to be here with you again.
Thank you, Dragna. Thank you so much. This was really very exciting. The video was great. Your presentation really brought that all together. I see there are a couple of questions on the chat, in the chat box. I'll pull up. There was one question on how your organization encourages the ideas of gender equality, which you have tried to respond by, by talking about how disruptive, creating that kind of provocation is one of the methodology, and the roles played by role reversals played by both men and women is supposed to create a kind of a dissonance or provoke the audience, and that is expected to be disruptive. Is that right understanding, Dragna? You want to add some more layered, nuanced understanding of the pathways through which this kind of disruptive processes are likely to transform the ideas, so rigid ideas of gender roles and norms? Would you like to reflect?
Yes, I apologize, Ravi, because I didn't actually, the presentation disabled me to see that in the chat box, the people couldn't hear me good enough, and that the internet was actually very slow. It could have been that it's on my end. I'm at home, so it doesn't actually work so well from here all the time. So in answer to the question from that was posed, that very curious to understand the ideas on gender equality the Dragon's organization encourages. I have to say that is that the layer that you actually wanted me to explain?
Yes, yes, and I tried to explain my understanding of your presentation, which highlighted on the issue of how provocative these programs are, and the provocation leads to the dissonance, disruption, and some kind of introspection. But you have a better idea about that. So please.
Yes, yes. So the gender equality is a very, so to speak, a huge word in our parts of Europe. And when we say gender equality, it doesn't actually mean like increase the number of women in the parliament, increase the number of women in like a workforce, on create, you know, like a meaningful participation of women, because it's we feel it's solely numbers that are not telling the just of the situation, and they're not actually given the exact, so to speak, profound effect. They do not have a profound effect on the genuine equality between women and men. We are tackling different aspects, and this particular project actually deals with the aspect of language as well. So, you know, when you say, when a man says something, it's very strategic, but when a woman says something, it's very manipulative. So we were actually trying to deal with the language as well here. Language as a cross-cut topic that actually makes all of us wonder why we are so inclined to one choice or the other choice. Or why would we even have to have a choice if we don't want to have a choice? So we're dealing with different population here. So gender equality for us means the relinquishing on the heteronormativity in all aspects of our life. And this was solely one aspect, in a way to see how the changing of a setting that actually sounded so fun to us would induce some changes. If I hope that I've answered the question correctly, but if I have not, I'm here for additional question. Thank you.
You answered it. Perfect. This is perfect. Right. Thank you so much. Very clear. And I'm sure everybody can relate to your response, because all of us, not only in Europe, but everywhere else, who are engaging in this kind of a difficult and deep-rooted issues, trying to change them, are dealing with exactly the same issues that you're saying. You know, this is an issue not only about just few outcomes, achievement of number of women achieving certain goals which are measurable, but there are so many non-tangibles in the process, and that requires the language, that requires understanding of intersectionality, that requires addressing these issues through the process of long-term socialization that happens at multiple levels. And I think this is where Manek's presentation did talk about some very nuanced aspects of how to deal with rejection. And there is a question there: how do you use the idea of rejection to transform men and the idea of gender equality? Manek, please.
Thank you. Thank you for that question. I think this was actually a very fundamental, interesting finding that became important to the way we look at building curricula going forward. What we did realize, I said this a little bit in the presentation, that this idea of betrayal, right? Like this rejection is not just, he has said no to me. It didn't seem like only that, okay, somebody has said no to me and I will not be able to have this. It seems like a betrayal in the perception of all the young boys that we spoke to. Somebody saying no to them, particularly a girl saying no to a romantic relationship or an overture, seemed like a betrayal. It came from the entitlement that if I ask somebody out, obviously and automatically she has to say yes. And if she doesn't, then she is actually doing something which is much bigger than actually simply just saying, I don't want to be with you. But how we have used this is in a couple of ways. One is building specific conversations in the curriculum that we have then to work with young boys. To talk about expressing feelings and legitimizing certain behaviors linked to certain feelings. So the first step would be changing this perception of rejection, outlining that, okay, you're not entitled to a relationship. So it's a rejection is just no, it is not a betrayal, and the difference between those two things. That becomes the first part of it. And the second part of it is to really have a more empathetic conversation, even with young men, about what kind of bad behavior do you allow yourself to do or legitimize for yourself when you feel hurt and when you feel rejected. And the fact that, and then build a cognition of the fact that, the burden of your feeling and the reactions that you have because of a certain feeling should not be on other people. So I think that becomes a very important inroad for us to have conversations about rejecting violence, whether it is violence against other men who you feel are at the other end of this rejection that you have received, or violence against the women who are saying no to you, or who are not wanting to be in relationships that you propose to them. So I think these findings have actually helped us build specific interactive exercises, case studies, scenarios that we use in curricula, interactive sessions with young men and boys in our sexuality education curriculum, as well as in our work on gender-based violence prevention, that then allows us to really relate conversations on consent with young people's actual lived experiences, many of them being on WhatsApp chats or on dating platforms, etc. So we're able to bring in all of that very, very real situation into the training scenario.
I'm glad that you mentioned the idea of lived experience. I think a lot of men who are at their personal level are transformed or are trying to address these issues in their personal lives, but are not vocal about it, are not seen, have no appropriate expressions for it. And they are always questioned, and the idea of pressure, succumbing to the pressures come into play. That is where I think this whole issue of how do we create an environment which relates to these ideas of transformation in a lived kind of an experience, where day-to-day insignificant normalized kind of experiences and relationships are not seen something out of the box. They just happen on day-to-day basis. A lot of men are engaged in these kind of equal and respectful behaviors, but either those behaviors and those attitudes get disproportionately represented or misrepresented when it comes to admitting them. So you're right that the policies, the programs, the interventions, the larger community-based normative shift programs need to really make these changes a lived experience. Can you or Dragna reflect on one point? I'm really curious. How do you see this whole giving up privilege mean? What does this really mean in programs? It's you both have talked about privilege and entitlement as kind of a major entrenched barrier. I'm not going on to still there's another issue of violence, recognition of violence, which is non-physical forms of violence, which Kinga's, I think, finding did bring out so well. But I'm not going there. But how do you see in your programs, Dragna and Manak, in quick ways, what does this giving up privileges mean, and how do you identify them, and what do you do to make sure that that sustains and what are the conflicts, and so on and so forth, I think. Yes. So who will
maybe
take
I can start, and
okay.
maybe Dragna can help bring my maybe scattered thoughts together in her intervention. So I think it means a couple of things to us, this whole idea of giving up privilege. And I started with saying we were quite curious to understand how even we as an organization are able to facilitate young men's feminist leadership. And that has been quite a challenge. I think at the first level, while what we did learn from many other programs who are doing it well was the idea of, say, domestic responsibility division. Particularly for young men and boys, what is the responsibility division at the home? Do young men contribute more to domestic labor, to the care work, etc.? And those kinds of gender stereotypes linked with this kind of actual division of responsibilities, how much leisure time boys have compared to girls, etc., became the easier conversation to have with young men and boys, because the proof was right there in their interactions with the women in their own families, in the groups sometimes. And that was a little bit easier to transact in terms of conversation. I think the other thing that programs, particularly on gender, don't touch so much is the other huge aspect of caste privilege in India, particularly. And that axis sort of pervades every experience that men are having. And I think that leads to experiences of violence as well, where, there is a certain privilege you have, which is of gender against, and it became, interestingly, in our experience, easier to generate empathy and sympathy for other genders who are getting a worse deal than actually bring, empathy and sympathy for men from different communities among men who were in our programs. And that was a harder conversation to have. I think the other thing I would say is around privilege is that very insidiously, it went in many ways when men sat down to design what they will do. Groups of boys were very quick to say, okay, now we have figured out gender. We know now what masculinity is, how we should be. We know what is a cool thing to say in this group. So now let us go and teach women what gender inequality means. And I think for programs, that is a trap that we have to continuously watch out for, that when we put men and young boys at the helm of leadership action, which is community facing, the propensity or the possibility of them going and starting to teach women about gender reality is something that we had to continuously watch and tell them, no, hold on, actually, you can't have this conversation with women, they already know. And I think that's where that sort of public facing conversation, giving them the opportunity to do that and sort of really hand-holding groups of men to understand how they shouldn't use their privilege, but how in a public community facing interaction, they can remove themselves from the leadership of that interaction and put other genders at the helm and be supportive. I think that for us became a very important and insightful experience of facilitating this kind of giving up of privilege and leadership space, which men, even in gender equality programs, are very quick to grab onto and take on in community interactions.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. And Dragna, would you briefly on this? Also, please add.
Yes, of course.
Yet another, so I found your approach very front about disruption, and I was just wondering, how do you mitigate if there are impact of such disruptions in the communities or in the families as well?
Yes. I will answer the question about the privileges, and please, if I did not capture what you have asked now, please tell me, and I'll go back to prolonging it, actually widening it. So when we speak about the privileges, I am not sure that we are talking about the giving in of the privileges. We're just talking about the reformulating the privileges, because we are trying to perpetuate the communication that it's not the privileges, it's this discrimination. So if you provoke the thinking in this particular way, that the privileges are one thing, but here we are talking clearly about discrimination. So we want the young people to be very distinct. We don't force anybody to follow the opinion or to agree. We are just, as our colleague said, we are provoking thinking and providing arguments. So we did not say, this is what you should do, this is what you should feel, this is how you should actually move on from now until the eternity. We are just hoping that as a persons, the beneficiaries, the young people that we are targeting, will be able to see that it's not the privileges. This is, you know, like the discrimination that the women are facing, and that the group of the men and the boys are so large factor in solving it. Not just telling them like, hey, don't think about this in this way, but, you know, like change the mindset, but showing them how brutally offensive it can be. And this is like, when you say about how do they give in privileges, they don't. They just actually shift the privileges to another part folder of their life, to another portfolio of their life, when privileges are actually privileges. In this particular way, they are not perceived if the situation is right in our scenario and in our project. They are not perceived as privileges anymore. So I hope I've answered your question, but if not, please tell me.
Interesting, very interesting to take that route of discrimination rather than privilege. And I'm sure there's a food for thought for all of us who are listening to this presentation and these ideas to think over it. But this is clearly one needs a complete command over how you navigate those discussions and how you leave those ideas and provoke and thinking and provide them. So it's amazing work, Dragon, and both you and Manak. Kinga is gone. Vikas has given me a warning that it's only 2 minutes left. So, but thank you. I think I truly enjoyed being here. I feel privileged to be part of this conversation and to be listening in such a focused manner, all the three presentations and your ideas, so insightful, and they align so much with the long-term struggle that all of us who are engaged in this field, trying to relate to this. Most gender transformative programming would tell you that over the last 10, 15, 20 years have some key features in them, and non-negotiables, for example. And one of the non-negotiables is that one has to move beyond individuals to address the larger systems and structures. It's not just the attitudes of people, not only the perceptions, but they have to be embedded within the larger structural responses that has been said often repeatedly, and there are programs that are trying to do that, and I'm so glad to see that that's happening here. And then different points like multi-level programming that happens. And also the other piece that is coming out so well in these experiences is that a lot of these changes are embedded in the lived experiences of people, and that means that there is a need to bring in socialization and change lived experiences from the family to the communities to the institutions, and it has to begin early. And that's why most programs, the programs on comprehensive sexuality education or gender education within the schools, starting very early early ages, is so critical, because then you begin to create a generation that uses different language, uses transformed ways of relating, and not getting into the issues of what is entitled and what I'm losing out, and doesn't see this kind of gender equality as a zero-sum game. And that is perhaps the eventual aim for this all this movement. Although I still think that it has yet not become a movement, but I think 25 years of work has been tremendous on the issues of men and masculinities. A lot of experiences, a lot of writings, a lot of publications have come, and in the public spaces. I'm so glad that you are all open to share your findings, open to share experiences cross-culturally, which is another very important point, that all these experiences are not really, although they are culturally embedded, but they are so cross-cultural, they're so universal. The patriarchy operates across cultures, across nations in ways which is surprisingly similar. And its impact is similar. It's kind of a universal conspiracy, it seems, that needs to be addressed in profound ways. So I'll I wish you all very best. I really thank you all for making this presentation. I also thank IPPF to invite me to be chairing this session, listening, giving me an opportunity to listening to you, all of you. Thank you, Vikas, and your friends and colleagues. There were glitches during the presentations. I apologize, but I think at the end of the day, you all did a fantastic, tremendous, job in saying what you wanted to say. And I think you made it very clear what you want to. I'm sure that whoever is here, all the audience have benefited from this session and the presentations. And the details will be shared by Vikas and his team to others once this is over. So thank you. So I hand you back this session, Vikas.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ravi. You've made my job easy of summarizing the session and of saying what we all learned from the session. I think for me, what I'm actually carrying back home today, and I know in this platform, every time that we've spoken, there's one new thing that I always take back from how to engage men and boys. And I think Manak's, Dragana's, and even Renew's presentation earlier did highlight about this fact of engagement with boys, but it should be constructive in nature, in a sense that takes them into the picture and takes everybody along. Thanks, Ravi, for moderating the session, and thank you, Manak, Dragana, and I'm going to write to Renew. And for all the audience who've been part of this session, please feel free. I know we've not been able to put all your questions, but please feel free to write to us at the Saro Forum's email ID that's available on the website, and we will try and reach out to all the speakers here and get the answers if possible. Thank you so much, and bye-bye. Have a nice day. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Dragana. Thank you, Manak. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.